Hi there, and welcome to Shapers, Makers, Builders, and Breakers. I'm your host today, Benjamin Shaw. Shapers is the podcast show that brings you African leadership stories in all spheres of society, where we interview exceptional individuals telling us their story.
This podcast is brought to you by Geere Capital. Geere Capital is a leading alternative private equity fund manager that through its 15-year history have focused on investing in African businesses with purpose and impact. Geere covers the whole of the African continent with investment teams based in Cape Town, South Africa and Nairobi, Kenya, currently managing investments in 9 African countries. The core investment thesis revolves around partnering with exceptional businesses and their teams that have the ability to impact Africa in the decades to come. Geere does this through providing growth capital to these businesses, but more than that, leveraging a partnership ethos with the companies they invest in. For more information, please have a look at their website, www.exeocapital.com. That is www.exeocapital.com.
A little different to our usual podcasts, this episode is one of a 2-part special in partnership with the SA Innovation Summit, where we got the opportunity to engage with key shapers of the Southern Africa entrepreneurial ecosystem. On this show, we have wide-ranging discussions with Geere and Tamiko Sher, tech research and AI marketing entrepreneurs who are both digitizing and uplifting Africa and have lessons to share in ecosystem development, co-founder matching, drones, and much more.
We hope that you will enjoy today's conversation as much as we enjoyed recording it. Without any further delay, let's dive into our next episode of Shapers, Makers, Builders, and Breakers.
With me now is Geere, who's the founder and CEO of Adbot, an agency focused on small business digital marketing. With experience across workflow management, an ex-operational executive, and with a background in graphic design and art direction, Michelle definitely falls into the category of maker on our podcast. Michelle's built a robot-first campaign management system for small business to access marketing on the global stage. This is mostly via Google Ads, as I understand, and that brings many African businesses into the digital age. So welcome, Michelle.
Awesome. Thanks, Ben. Thanks for having me.
Well, the first thing I'd like to do is give you the chance to introduce the problem that you founded Adbot to solve. What led you to build the company?
Right. So my background is 15 years in advertising, digital advertising specifically.
Big agencies?
Much bigger agencies. I started before Facebook was even a thing. So,
okay.
We won't give away my age there, but I've always kind of like been in that space, and I worked for agencies like Glue and Hello Computer, who were the big ones at the time, and obviously subsequently have been purchased by the bigger guys. So that's my background. That's something that I loved and trained for. And then I started my own digital agency when I was a little bit older in life, and I thought this is going to be easy. My digital agency was focused on SMEs, and I know how to advertise online. Obviously, this is going to be a really easy thing to do. So off I started this business. I didn't have capital. I had a couple of retainer clients, and I wanted to advertise on Google. So had a lot of connections, called up a friend, Bernadette. I was like, help, what are we going to do? She's like, for you, we'll give you a discounted rate. We'll only charge you 3,000 Rand a month,
sure,
but you have to pay 10,000 Rand for us to advertise on Google. And I was like, oh my God, is this, I don't have that. So I thought, okay, cool. How hard can this be? I can do this myself. And I jumped onto the platform, and one evening, just 3 hours later, 700 YouTube channels probably deep, I realized that this is actually a problem. It's really hard to actually set it up. Number one, nobody knows how to do it. The platform is really complicated. And there are so many. This was just one of the many that are out there. I mean, Google is one, but Bing is, with ChatGPT is really...
It's making a resurgence.
Is taking sometimes preference and is gaining market share quite a bit in Africa, which is interesting. So not only do you have to do this for one channel, you now have to do it for everyone else. It was, so I kind of like thought, if I was struggling this much with so much experience, like what would a plumber do, or an electrician, or a
small business owner,
or a small business owner, or a startup that's like, trying to solve a real world problem. How are they going to navigate this? And kind of, it's become a bit of an obsession. Like, how do we make this really easy for small business owners to actually like advertise online? And if you think about it, online advertising, well, how I think about it is that online advertising is one of the most cost-effective and effective ways to access markets, right?
Right.
And if you can do that affordably, it's really a must for growing your business. So if you don't have the time to do that or the money to do that, I think you're at a disadvantage. So that's the problem we're trying to solve.
I would agree with that. It sounds like the problem you're trying to solve, though, wasn't evident until you started trying to do it yourself.
Absolutely.
So the idea of the agency that has now become Adbot, was that significantly different to what you've now morphed into? What was the idea at that point, and what made you realize that the problem was big enough to solve as a standalone?
So the original agency that I started, entrepreneurs don't just have one business.
Pivot, yeah.
Not just even pivot. You like start one thing and stop and do another thing. I mean, in between that and Adbot, there was also biodiesel. So it's just multiples. So that agency was quite different in the sense that it worked on human resource and human hours. And it was only a couple of years later that I met my co-founder, who was looking at a similar problem on how do we solve this human resource issue? Because in the traditional agency world, you have to oversell the human hours. You have to make those humans work extra hours without compensation in order to make the clients happy.
It's a margin play.
Exactly. So it's really something that we really needed to solve. I think ChatGPT is doing some really interesting things to solve that for creative. I don't think they're there yet, but I think it's coming soon. I don't think strategic and creative parts will be resolved or solved, but I really think this mundane rollout, optimization, things that we're currently doing with human resources is just not worth paying for. And I think that's where the two minds kind of like met, and we started building something that is actually really workable. And
that's become Adbot today.
And that's become Adbot today.
Now, you mentioned your co-founder. What was that process like? It's a point of difficulty for most founders, particularly in South Africa, where skills shortage means that many competent people go straight into corporate. You had the opportunity to stay in that sort of field, and you moved into building your own business. You found someone else willing to do that. How did you do that? How did you meet? How did you link up? And maybe then some advice for founders on that journey who may be looking for their partner.
So what's interesting is I had a couple of partners in my different entrepreneurial journey and different businesses. And what makes a good partner, I've realized, is not the things that you originally think they do. I think one thing that one has to realize is that you and this partner are going to go on a quite intense journey. You're going to face things that maybe some partners in marriage don't face. So I think it's quite interesting. And I think when you select your partner, it usually starts out maybe as friendship or somebody that you worked with as a student or whatever. But I don't think that's necessarily the basis of a good partnership. I think a good partnership is somebody that is open and that can manage situations with kindness and respect. And then you can navigate almost any situation. As long as you have respect and you have an open kind of like discussion, you'll be able to resolve it, is my view. My co-founder at the moment, with Adbot, how we met is when I ran the digital agency, a part of the services that we delivered was B2B, and we functioned as like a bit of we call it a white label agency for above the line agencies. And we had a couple of agencies that used us at the time. So my co-founder was the owner of one of those agencies. Mm-hmm. We started working really closely together. And through that journey, realized like there is some synergies in values. There's a lot of respect. And then ventured into Adbot with a little bit more structure and
and a vision.
and a vision, yeah, absolutely.
It's interesting that you say that the trust and respect comes first. I think that's a take that you only get with experience. You often first look for skills and competence, and only afterwards look for the softer side of the personality or the character. And you can get lucky, and there are other people who will tell you the opposite, and it's really burnt them. As I understand it, Adbot is an all-female team. There are very few startups that are built in that way. That's a really wonderful, inspirational story for many of our listeners. Has that been overly conscious for you to go that way? How has that developed? Has the market received it well? Tell us a bit about how that's developed.
Yeah. It is a all-women team. So before I go into the all-women side, obviously when we started, we were bootstrapping. There was no funding coming in. This is like 4 years ago. We were trying to kind of like build this thing. We haven't had like an MVP yet, and it was crazy. And we needed some hands on deck. So what we did is we approached Uvu. I don't know if you know Uvu Africa, who train up kids from underprivileged backgrounds and then place them in corporates. Or startups or whatever. And we connected with them, and we got a couple of interns who then helped us out. And what was really interesting is so they were all like males and females and all sorts and from all backgrounds of life. And what was really interesting is that the guys who actually then stayed around, they were all females, all coming from like really underprivileged backgrounds, but they had this absolute passion to make their lives better. And I thought that was really inspirational and really amazing. I think of myself as a conscious and an aware person. So when we started growing and we got some funding and we started employing some people, I was aware of the fact that I have a slight bias towards employing men. And I thought, this is a great opportunity to try and overcome that. And we had a couple of guys starting and working with us, but I just find, and perhaps we didn't find the right peeps, but I just found that they didn't have that same kind of like passion to go forward. And I don't think it's by design, but I think it's our values. We have these 5 values, which you'll see everybody at the conference is wearing it on their T-shirts. But we have these 5 values that is just like critical to the business and the business success. And the people who are around now live those values, not just in their personal life, but as well as their work life. And I think that it just so happened that they're all female. I have a theory that we have to fight harder, and we have to have more resilience, and we have to have more respect, and I think maybe that's got something to do with it. But our team at the moment has never been as strong, and I think it's partly because these women are living those values, also partly because they're all women.
And there's a sense of camaraderie in that. I'm sure there's a sense of identity established. We can come back to the point because I think it's a really interesting one and worth unpacking. I've recently come across some writing which says, to be someone, you must first see someone. And it's sort of shorthand for, if you don't have a role model that you can relate to and resonate with, it's difficult for you to really identify a path that you can take to get into that positional role, which is why I come back to how inspirational the story is of an all-female team. Let's talk a bit about what Adbot brings. So you're a digital-first agency, and certainly some of your taglines that I've seen are "bots do it better," "robots can replace humans." Now, there's some controversy in those statements, which is great. What is it that AI is bringing that you didn't have maybe 4 years ago? It's hugely topical at the moment.
Of course.
And how does your team adapt your product offering to your clients?
To answer that question, I'm going to go back and just give you like some philosophy that I have. So I think that humans are really great at strategy and creativity, right? I think we can think outside of the box. And at the moment, I don't believe AI can do that yet. It needs a lot of instruction in order to perhaps even get close to that. So the things that we're really bad at is the stuff that we have to do on a repetitive basis, right? Write notes for a meeting, or manage a calendar, or optimizing your Google Ads, or all of that stuff is stuff that we're actually really not really good at, and there's lots of human error that kind of can happen in that. And I think AI for us.
Could I interrupt you? Do you mean to distinguish between creative and objective? Would that be a fair characterization of the repetitive work you're talking about? So there's an objective right and wrong for non-creative tasks, and on the creative side, there's a lot more room for strategy and out-the-box thinking, or would that be an unfair definition?
Yeah, so I don't think it's quite that. So okay. I think creativity for me is like understanding concept, understanding what will relate to someone, and understanding how you can connect with a person in whatever format. Yeah,
resonance, creative resonance, and what would the AI ability bucket look like?
That would just be anything that's repetitive. So let me give you some examples within the agency world, and then you can help me find some terminology for it. So it's like, in Google Ads, you have to log onto your Google Ads account every single day. You have to go to find keywords that are not performing, move money that is on those keywords that are not performing, and move that money to keywords that are performing, so that you can get optimization, right? That's one example. Another example is capturing supplier invoices. Ain't nobody got time for that either. So that for me is what the AI can really do. There is some thinking around it, right? But there's no concept around it. It's not like...
it can be made into a science to some degree.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly. So I think...
So where does Adbot play into that world?
Right. So Adbot, with Adbot, I think we keep it open to allow the owner of the business to still have some creative freedom in order to implement. So we're not taking over everything completely. I think it will get there at some point as we get busier or focusing on other things. But so Adbot essentially wants you to say, I want to advertise on this platform. This is my budget. And you must fill in, literally, it must take 2 minutes of your time. You must approve the ads. Obviously, with language models now, we can pre-fill your ads after just like having a look at your website. Wow. And essentially, it does the work for you. So it's almost like a team member that you've appointed, and you are just reviewing the results on an ongoing basis. Obviously, the bot is not going to figure out what your campaigns must be for Christmas or for Father's Day or Mother's Day. That's still your part as the business owner. So you make those things up, you put it on your website, and you give the information over to the bot, and the bot can run. It's the same as ChatGPT. It doesn't really work if you're not prompting it correctly, or if you're not giving it the right instruction. Who was saying it? Last night I went to Level Up, and there was a French futurist talking about all the trends, and he was talking about AI, and he said, you must see AI as a really efficient intern, right? And if you think about interns, you have to give them a lot of instructions. They've never done this thing before. And I think it was really it's really key. And I think Adbot's the same thing. If you give it the right instruction, it's going to get you the best results.
I think that's a really apt concise way to put it. Of course, it moves so quickly that definition might be out of date by the time the pod
tomorrow.
goes up. That's right. But nonetheless, I think very helpful. We've zoomed right in to what Adbot does. Let's zoom all the way out.
Right.
You serve SMEs, you said, across, is it Africa, South Africa?
Africa.
Africa, right across Africa. What are the trends you're seeing, and how should we as a community of either leaders or aspiring leaders look to grow the business network that you've seen or are involved in?
Oh, Africa. Africa is a very big passion point of mine for multiple different reasons. I think Africa is so chaotic, and I think in that chaos there's a lot of opportunity, right? And I think that opportunity, for the same reasons that the opportunity is there is also a lot of challenges. And I think if we are able as leaders and as Africans to solve for Africa, we're going to see some really amazing things in the future. I cannot see somebody like Google or Microsoft moving into Nigeria and solving their problems. Like it's just not going to happen because they don't understand their behavior. Let me give you an example. I don't know if you do this, but I do this, and I am a lot older than you probably, and I'm still doing this. And it started when I was a student, but every second day I put in 200 rand petrol. Why do I not fill my tank? Like it will never happen, right? And if I tell that to friends,
save your weight on mileage. That's it.
If I tell that to some people in the US, they're like mind blown. I don't understand what that means. And it's such a small example.
It's a great example.
But if you think about it, right? If somebody in the US is building an ad solution, they're going to, for example, say, in our behavior, we fill up our tank. So you pay upfront the full amount on your ad spend. And in Africa, maybe that behavior doesn't work. So how do we fix that? And beyond that, we have to fix, like, how do we receive the money if everything is cash-based? And so there's a lot of things to fix. I don't know if I've answered your question. I think I've chatted more about Africa and how excited and passionate I am about that. But
no, it's brilliant. I think the trend I'm going to pull out from that is that we can't be reliant on developed country solutions coming in, and despite the fact they often portray themselves as the saviors, they're just not, and it needs to be developed locally. Maybe let's amend the question a little bit to say, in Africa, in the work you're doing, who has either inspired you to continue to build the company that you're building, or you think is having a big, significant impact on attacking some of the problems we have?
So one of the guys that I found exceptionally inspiring is the guys who started Paga in Nigeria. I don't know if you know them.
No.
So they are like M-Pesa. Okay. So they're the biggest mobile money situation in Nigeria. And it's just been incredible because obviously they have got Flutterwave and obviously Flutterwave is also a really inspirational story. But these guys are really supporting small businesses, really understanding what they're about, and giving them not only transactional means, but also support in all sorts of different aspects. And I think, again, if we look at things like Paga, if we look at things like another really great inspirational space is more in education, is ALX and the African Leadership Group. How they are training and making sure that in the future, everybody is going to be educated and basically our workforce is going to sit in Africa. And I think those are Africans solving Africa's problems, and that's why they're so successful. Also, I think Africans have got a lot of empathy and they have a lot of resilience, despite or maybe because of what they have gone through. And I think that bigger corporations or international companies will come here and try and solve it with cash. And I don't think Africa can be solved with cash. I think you have to have understanding and a lot of resilience.
I think that's a really great answer. Something that's consistently come up actually at the summit. We're obviously sitting at the SA Innovation Summit to do this recording. I'm quite interested to know, the African business landscape is not well populated with female business leaders. What has the reception been like for a team which, as you say, has been built on values, which so happens to have generated a sort of an identity around that?
Yeah, it's interesting. So I have a bit of a distorted view on that question because our first pre-seed funding was done by Enigma Ventures, which is a all-female investor group. And what came with that was this connection of really amazing women leaders. So people who are building banks in Zambia, people who are doing like credit lending, peer-to-peer lending in Zambia, people who are making a change in agricultural sustainability in Swaziland. So I've seen a lot of amazing women doing a lot of amazing things and earning a lot of big checks.
Returns, yeah.
And all of them are like really passionate about their communities and passionate about like what they're doing. So my view is a little bit distorted because I think that there are so many people out there who are passionate. I'm probably seeing the ones who have received funding, but I think that there are so many out there. And if they had the means to funds, if they had the means to access to markets, we would see a lot more of them. I think Africa is a little bit different because it's a lot of them are patriarchal societies. But it's interesting where in those patriarchal societies, you have the woman who basically brings in the cash, right? I don't know if you know about the sickle cell research that's been done, and most females have to work because they're mostly affected by men, and they can't really work that hard. So the women go out and work, but the men control the wallet and the political decision makings in the house. So it's a really interesting thing. Like
it's an amazing dynamic. Sorry to break your word. Just thinking of Grameen Bank and the research that they did in funding, providing microloans to women working in the community, entrepreneurs, and how effective that was in uplifting entire nation and communities which had so little and produced so much. So that's heartening to hear. And did you say it's Enigma Partners?
Enigma Ventures.
Enigma Ventures. Michelle, what is a question that you really hope someone will ask about your business, about your story, and give us an answer to it? So my partner would say, "Oh, you're so boring," but well, we'll tell you.
So I want you to ask me what I do to kind of like get my mind off business, because obviously entrepreneurs are constantly 24/7 on it.
Right. And what do you do?
I build only one Land Rover. So I built a Land Rover 1966, and she's really old, and she is beautiful, and she's the love of my life. Second love of my life. But it's so interesting. Like, I think when you're an entrepreneur, your brain is wired to solve problems, right? And without you even knowing, you would solve problems anywhere, right? So maybe you would get home and then you want to like move the house around because the decor is probably not right. I don't know. So what I find really interesting about this project of mine is that you are constantly solving, because there's always something broken. Obviously, it's the Land Rover.
It's the Land Rover.
So your brain has to solve something, and it's just really kind of, I find it refreshing that it's not solving Adbot and the day-to-day stuff, that it's solving something else. And it just kind of like, when you then come back to the work-life things, it's like, oh, right, you solved this thing. Of course, you're going to be able to solve that thing. So,
that's fascinating. Cool. I've got friends of mine who have exactly the same hobby, or really it's a side project at this point, because it's every weekend they're doing something.
Every weekend.
And to do trips, they have to go with other cars because they know
it's going to break down.
Which is also fun, I suppose. The risk-taking also appeals to the entrepreneur.
That is very true.
You've worked, as you said, across Africa. The entrepreneurial ecosystem that we've experienced here at the summit, but in general across Africa, is still nascent. What is a surprise takeaway you have from the businesses you've worked with? Something that you maybe learned recently or didn't expect to see and have found?
So I think our ecosystem is small, but I think it is so tight, right? And I think what I really found surprising is that in the middle of Tanzania, maybe not in the middle, more on the coast side, And in the middle of Rwanda and Kigali, there are these hubs of innovation popping up, and they are changing real world things that other people have struggled with so much. And I think what I found really interesting is that it doesn't matter where in Africa, we are a continent that of people who are really innovative and creative and, like I said, resilient. And I think these hubs that are popping up everywhere is just giving them a little bit more support and a little bit more access to markets and access to finance. And it's amazing to see that it's where you wouldn't have expected. I mean, I didn't realize, like Zanzibar.
Oh.
I thought that was a holiday place. Now it's holiday and work, you know?
Wonderful.
No, so that's quite surprising, and it's amazing to see the support in Africa. I'm always surprised to see like how much support there really is, and it is true. We need a lot more, especially financial support. But it is amazing to see that if you can find yourself into those spaces, that you will get the support.
Oh, that's a heartening takeaway. You've led a company now through what is perhaps the largest paradigm shift in AI, that we will see in our lifetime, a bit like mobile was or internet was maybe 25 years ago. What leadership lesson maybe could you leave with our listeners for how to navigate the changes which are coming thick and fast? And maybe you could answer by sharing how you've navigated in the last year the changes that have come into the industry.
Sure, that's a really, really good question. I think so. I actually sat down earlier in this year. I went to Silicon Valley just for exposure and to understand how they do fundraising, etc. What was really interesting is the people there are talking about exactly like you said. This is like the mobile phone. This is like the beginning, a new version of when we had apps on our phone. Like everyone built an app to, and I think the version of what we're going to see in the future, we're not really sure of what that looks like. But if we look at the infrastructure of data, if we look at AI and where that is going, I think things are going to be quite loosely held. If that makes any sense. I don't think it's going to be like an app, you might be able to, I don't know, do banking through your mobile app thing. I don't know.
So a lot of cross-integration of platform?
Yeah, perhaps cross-integration of platform. I think there's going to be platforms that we haven't really even known existed, but that will come up, etc. I think it's so unknown, and I think the thing that I would say to people is that the minute you think you have a solve, and the minute you think you're right, and this is what we're going to do, and we're going to head into the future, is the minute that you've lost. I think you have to stay open to thinking that this is maybe a solve for right now with the circumstances, with the technology, with the progress. But tomorrow it might be different, and that solve might be old, and you need to find a new one. But I think the minute that you are adamant that your solve is the solve, I think you have lost. Understanding that you constantly would have to be malleable. What do you call it?
Malleable, yeah.
There we go. And be able to change and look at what is happening around you and finding like a new solution. And you're going to have to maybe find a new solution every day, whereas in the past we had to find one for a decade or one for a month. Or
the transition period just seems so much shorter in the technology world we now live in, which is it's tech first almost. You first think of how tech solves it before you look at other solutions. I heard a really great quote, which I'll credit to the Revio co-founder Nicole Dunn. I heard recently, and she said, successful entrepreneurs marry the problem, not their solution. They're so passionate about fixing the problem that they're quite happy to change up how they solve it over time. I thought that was really apt in considering how AI is going to allow for myriad solutions really quickly, rapid fire. But so long as we keep focused on the problem we're solving, we have the opportunity to use it.
Absolutely. So I've just finished reading a book called Fall in Love with the Problem and Not the Solution.
Okay, well, no
So
doubt.
there we go.
Okay, well, there you go.
So I totally agree with you. I think you're absolutely right. And so is Nicole.
So is Nicole, absolutely.
And if we keep on solving for the problem, the solutions, because the solutions are going to change, like you said, so rapidly, and we don't know in what sphere they're going to be. Like, you know, if we think about how we're moving away from perhaps phones to headsets to cars that are driving themselves, like that, a car driving themselves itself is like a whole new space. Like, can it be an office? Can it be a, you know, like we have to start thinking that those could be possibilities, I suppose. Could it be an app in itself inside? I don't know.
Well, we look forward to finding out.
Exactly.
Michelle, thank you so much for your time.
Awesome. Yeah, this has been a really good conversation.
How can people get in touch with you, maybe learn more about Adbot, your journey? How can they do that?
So anyone can find us on myadbot.com. And for anyone who wants to reach out, we are seed raising at the moment. So if anybody wants to reach out, they can get me on michelle@myadbot.com.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for joining.
Awesome. Great. Thanks so much.
Joining me now is Tamiko Sher, who is the Executive Director of African Institute for Entrepreneurship. It focuses on creating long-term value for an ecosystem of entrepreneurship across Africa, enabling a better environment for enterprises to grow through both research and practical application. She's got over 30 years consulting into the space as well as running businesses, and her academics include a Bachelor of Science in Business Administration from San Diego, Master of Arts from UCal, and honors from WITS, so a well-traveled student. She is also, and at the moment, highly invested in innovative leadership in technologies that enable entrepreneurship to develop in Africa. So Tamiko, it's so lovely to have you on the pod, and I'm super excited to hear about AIFE. That's the African Institute for Entrepreneurship. I think I got that right, that you co-founded. That's only a recent part of your journey. So walk us back. For the last 20, 30 years, you've been doing this. What is it that you do?
Oh, thank you so much. And I'm very excited to be here and appreciate you asking me about my story. So I came to South Africa probably about just under 30 years ago. And since I came here, I've always been incredibly impressed with how resilient people are. I originally came over on a corporate job, so the journey has been varied, 10 years in corporate, 20 years as an entrepreneur. And I remember going out into the townships in the late 1990s and someone saying to me, "You must see these people, they are phenomenal entrepreneurs." And it was like a dirt road. And I went in there and I saw this guy with this little shack with these crooked shelves and like sad little products. And I said, "What do you want?" And the guy said, "I want the Coke truck to come to my front door." And as we drove out, I said to the guy, "Well, I don't understand why you took me here, and I don't understand why you think this guy's a great entrepreneur." He said, "See, did you see how clean the shop was? Did you see how he lined up every single product and he had prices on everything?" And I felt very stupid. And I realized that I knew nothing about small business and I knew nothing about entrepreneurship. And it was sort of the beginning of a journey of saying there's an enormous amount of resilience out there that people have. And then the other question was, why do you want the Coke truck to come to your door? And the answer was, it's prestigious in the community where he was. Because,
Wow.
And so I said to myself, what I think that people need and what they actually need sometimes are very different. And what makes a great entrepreneur is something you can't always put into a book or write about. So that's kind of where I started. And then when I left Coke, I went on my own. And then been building ever since there on the entrepreneurship space.
So you mentioned a corporate job. You're working with Coke. I presume that meant starting in the States. Is that where you
No,
studied,
I actually started in Japan.
Started in Japan?
Yeah, so there's nothing like a little bit of humility where you go to a country and it's not your native language and you have to operate. So that was my first 4 years was there, and then 4 years in Southern Africa. So that covered Namibia, Botswana, Lesotho, Swaziland. So everything was just a learning journey about going into a new place. You know nothing. People come up to you and say, well, come, you're the expert, tell us. And the answer was, well, I'm not the expert, tell me what you need.
Sure.
Yeah.
Oh, fascinating. What a great way to bring in solutions without forcing them down someone's throat. Actually asking, we have quite a lot of entrepreneurs in Africa that start very small and look up to brands that are well known. Was that kind of the entry point for you as you engaged with the entrepreneurs at the start of the journey, that their eyes lit up with the brands that you could bring, or what was it that they were looking for?
When you work for a large multinational company that's in 200 countries around the world, it's a given. You walk into the door and everybody knows who you are. And then when you go on your own and you have to put the shoe on the other foot, then it's a very uncomfortable space. So yes, when you're working for a huge company, it's very easy. And then when you go on your own, you have to learn a new journey and you have to redefine yourself.
So you were traveling the world, traveling Southern Africa on behalf of a big corporate, a multinational. What made you change and why Africa?
I actually went around the world. When I left Japan, and I spent every penny I had, and I had to get a job. So I called some guys I knew in Atlanta, and they said, where do you want to go? And I said, Turkey, France, or South Africa. And they said, there's a great CEO down there. I took a package that was a fraction of what I was earning in Tokyo.
Sure.
And no, I just loved it here. And then I came and I started working here. And then after 4 years, I was an expat, so they said, you are too expensive. So I got retrenched. And then I decided I've had enough. It's now time to do my own thing.
And that led you along the path to, you've mentioned being an entrepreneur for 20 years. You then started your own business. Was that in South Africa at this stage? Okay. And what business was that?
I started out, I think every entrepreneur knows this, you never end up doing what you start out doing. So, but actually I am still doing it today. I started an export agency selling to Japan because although I didn't know anything about running a business, I knew how to sell, and I knew how to sell in Japan. So I have, over the last 20 years, sold about 6 to 7 million rands worth of handmade arts and crafts to cruise ships, department stores, you name it. And I work with agents, and I sell products to only handmade products to the Japanese.
And what sort of products are they from Africa?
Beaded dollies, and whatever they want, paper mache pigs, whatever, ceramic. All the handmade goods, they had to be handmade, they had to be from South Africa. But I very quickly learned that that is not a viable business. It's more it's a measure of what's a passion that you have for helping people and helping people in rural areas. So then one day someone came to me and said, we're running this big event, can you commercialize an NGO product or an NGO? And I said, why not? And then I started from there.
So the NGO that approached you, was it an NGO that approached you?
Yes, it was.
Okay, and they looked at your business, but probably more your skill set, and said, come and help. What was that task, and how has that led to today?
It was a product called Marula Natural Products, and it was an NGO that had this team of women in Bushbuck Ridge and Mpumalanga, and they had become commercially viable, but they didn't know how to commercialize. They didn't know how to market. They didn't know how to put the products together. They didn't know how to put the price and everything. And they had the World Sustainable Summit, and they wanted to launch there.
And what was the product?
It was marula oil, packaged marula oil. Sure. They were selling the raw oil, and then they were eventually making it into bath products and beauty products.
So let's fast forward to today. I caught up with you a little earlier, and you mentioned a lot of the work you do now is research getting packaged into practical application for entrepreneurs or for ecosystems around entrepreneurs. Maybe unpack that a little bit for us, each of those elements. What is it that drives you to do it? You're hugely passionate about it, people talk of you and the impact that you've had for them. What is it that you really resonate with in this space?
I've always believed that that research is really, really critical to be successful in any business. And I think when you are deeply curious, and you cannot be an entrepreneur without being very deeply curious and deeply passionate, then you tend to go into something and you investigate and you research it. But I've also believed that a static piece of research that doesn't do anything doesn't have any meaning. So every time I create a publication, I always ask myself, can I visualize where this could lead us? So for example, our first publication was on the drone industry, and I've been a pilot for 28 years, and I thought, well, this is cute. Drones are cute. They're flying around. This will be easy. And I wrote publication. It turned out to be a monster. It was over 100 pages long. And then I got asked to go into a next level, which was unmanned traffic management, which is the next frameworks for flying drones. And now that's leading to a drone innovation corridor to be in South Africa. So I think for me, that's what are those opportunities for entrepreneurs? So being an entrepreneur myself and having done an extensive amount of corporate research, I could combine those understanding and say, if I'm an entrepreneur and I want to get into this brand new industry, which is to new tech is difficult, it's very hard to get data, is how do I get data packaged for me in a way that I can read it and I can understand it and I can say, A, B, C, this is what I need to do. If I look at it, there's 10 different permutations. Which one of them do I want to take? And who do I go to? And we always list like lots of resources and where can you get funding, where can you get information at the back. So we package all of our research and our thought processes and our thought leadership in a way that gets people excited and supporting not only the industry, but the entrepreneurs to take the businesses forward.
Now, research is such an interesting topic for entrepreneurs because oftentimes they're looking at disrupting an industry and actually counter-positioning against the status quo. Would you define what your research is in tech that's, days old in some cases?
It is often days old. I mean, we primarily do qualitative research. Okay. So we read
with products, with companies, or how do you?
With entrepreneurs who are actually doing the business. Wow. So for example, when we did the drone publication, we interviewed 50 people across the world, in UK, in Holland, in America, people at the cutting edge, people we talked to a guy in Ireland who was taking drone satellite data and combining and overlaying with drone data. So he was doing space and drones. We talked to people who were doing vertiports. We talked to people who were rewriting legislation. Vertiports is almost like you imagine a helicopter takeoff location. So you take a drone and you take off vertically. So it's on the basis of the type of propellers that a lot of the drones have. You can just take off vertically. So you need very little space. So that's what makes it very viable in a lot of locations. So we talk to entrepreneurs. That's what I do. I'd say my job is talking to entrepreneurs and saying, tell me what made it work for you. Tell me your secrets. Tell me what made the difference for you. That's a lot of my work is, in this difficult or new field, what is making the difference for you? And how can the ecosystem come and help you with those elements?
That's fascinating. So the research then becomes almost a driver for, it links, let's say, the ecosystem and what the ecosystem can provide back to the entrepreneurs at the coalface. How is that link made?
It's a combination of things. For example, the first time I came to SAIS was 3 years ago to launch the drone publication. And they've become a partner now on all our research, this year's research as well. They've been a partner. And then sometimes we do get clients. They'll come to us and say, wow, I really like what you did. So we do in-house a publication every year. So we pick something that's out there that we know nobody's writing about and think, wow, we really need to say something about this and talk to entrepreneurs in this space because it's so new. And then people come to us often and say, well, we love what you're doing. Can you do X, Y, and Z? So they'll come and say, can you do a paper on fintech and health tech and ed tech? And of course, I know nothing about any of them, and I always say yes. And then I go find entrepreneurs and experts and say, talk me through this. And I think when you are an entrepreneur and you talk to other entrepreneurs, the openness, they know you walk that journey with them, that you've been there before, that you've had months where there was no income, or you've had struggles and you've been through that. So they relate to it. So I find people are quite open.
So research going into an ecosystem and being applied in particular ways. Could you give us a few examples of how the ecosystem applies your research?
I think one of the biggest examples was, and this is really where was the grain of what started the African Institute for Entrepreneurship, was in 2016, I saw the mayor of Joburg announcing all these programs for entrepreneurs, and I thought they were all nonsense. So I thought, gosh, I've got to do something. So I had a bit of money from my consulting business at the time, so I took some of my own consulting money, and I interviewed all the entrepreneurs I knew. And then I put a publication together, and then the city of Joburg called me in and said, we love this, what's next? I said, you need to do an entrepreneurship ecosystem summit or symposium. And so we ended up doing 6 regional summits in the townships and a 2-day symposium for them. And then they wrote it into their economic development policy. So then I started to see that when you do research, and then some of the things I had done commercially for the city of Joburg, they were using for fundraising and using for capturing the bus rapid transit system. How did they co-opt the taxi industry to work with them? So I started to realize that if you write your research with the intention that it can have life beyond being static, that it can create new opportunities for other people. And then you can raise the voices of entrepreneurs to people who are at a policy level.
And is policy the goal out of the application that's been made in the ecosystem? Is that where you see the biggest change either necessary in South Africa or change being made currently?
No, I don't see policy as the biggest piece.
Okay.
I see the biggest piece as really the understanding of what entrepreneurs need, because I find that, like the situation with the city of Joburg, is that people don't understand what creates a business. I mean, I didn't understand when I was a salaried employee. I had no idea. I mean, my husband was an entrepreneur. I'd come home and I'd say, what are all these cloths sitting around here? What do you do? How do you actually make a living? So you have to go through a humility process to get there. And then the problem is then you're working with people who have never lived that fear, have never lived that experience. And they come up with programs that don't make sense. So the people who have the funds that can make the programs that can help, sometimes we're applying them in the wrong. Like right now, we're doing some research with the Banking Association of South Africa, which is saying, what can the banks do to help SMMEs? And then I'm working with someone who's a banker, and I'm not a banker. We're coming from polar opposites. I say, no, they're full of nonsense. They don't help at all. And he's saying, that's not true. So I said, it's good we have 2 points of view, because we now must park our prejudices and see what the data is giving us. And what the data says, and then we must calibrate that against our hypotheses and what we think. And that's often how we use research, is challenge your thinking, challenge your approach. See that if you have this money from the Banking Association or you have this capability, what can you do with that? How can I make recommendations on what can be done that can improve things for small businesses or for entrepreneurs?
It's very similar to the process startups undertake when they do validation of their ideas at the early stage, either validating assumptions positively or disproving the assumptions that they have. You've taken that up to an ecosystem level, which I guess makes sense. I haven't heard of it before, but is hugely valuable, because all of a sudden you've got cohorts of startups able to leverage that insight and not just one by one. Let's take a step back from South Africa. You've traveled quite extensively, you said. You've settled here. You said you love the country. What are we missing that you've seen in the other parts of the world that we could apply? We've got listeners to the pod who are founders, entrepreneurs, salaried employees. We have policymakers. What are the things that we've missed out on that we could get a lot better at that you've seen elsewhere?
I think for me, the key thing is, and any entrepreneur understands this, is you have to have ultimate optimism. If you are constantly saying, my country is terrible and it's going to the dogs and nothing is right here and this doesn't work here, you're not going to make it. And it's the same when you're an entrepreneur. It's almost like you have to have this unbelievable belief in what you do and where you stay. And if it isn't working, the answer is, what are you doing to be part of the solution? That's how I look at it. Is my work is about being part of the solution. It's about helping entrepreneurs to succeed, because that, to me, is where the growth is going to come from.
And I suppose if you were to compare it, there are other areas of the world where that is very evident, where almost through sheer willpower, entrepreneurs are pulling solutions out of hats, just making it work, sheer bloody-mindedness, I suppose. How does the Africa Institute for Entrepreneurship contribute to the ecosystem? And what would you like people to take away if they wanted to find out some more information about it?
I think the key thing that we really focus on is, how can we assist the ecosystem? What is the evidence-based data that we are bringing to the table that no one else has? That's not built on, hi, I went and I looked at 50 academic articles, but I talked to people who are in this business and this is their insights. So that is, to me, is one of the key contribution, and then taking it forward in formats like this, where it's a kind of thought leadership to get people to refocus their look. I think you can follow us on social media, on LinkedIn, on our website, www.aife.africa. Like everybody else, it's probably out of date, but we're there and we're always keen to engage.
What makes you passionate about doing it here?
Well, I got married and I'm here, okay. So I'm not going anywhere.
Tick one.
That's fun. But I think South Africans underestimate your own resilience. I think I have seen people do stuff that I'm astonished by. I mean, I think like when the floods happened and down in KwaZulu-Natal, and people had to rescue people. I'm always, and people have nothing. And then they somehow find a way to make things work. It's just incredible resilience, incredible backing up against the line, and somehow pulling through, pulling a rabbit out of a hat when you least expect it. So I think that's the one thing that's really, for me, sets South Africa apart.
Well, that's encouraging to hear and full of optimism. I'm going to ask two last questions. The SA Innovation Summit, SAS, as you mentioned, has partnered with you. What does that look like? How are you involved?
Oh, so we call it, so Buntu called me a few years ago and he said, geez, Tamiko, I really love the work you guys did in the drone. And I said, thank you, because he helped us launch the NGO. And it was his first year as CEO as well. And so he said, I'd really love to do something in thought leadership space with you. And so I said, well, as a matter of fact, someone's approached me and asked me to do a paper on UTM, and I'm going to co-opt 10 people to volunteer to be part of it. Can I ask you to size to back that? And then this year's as well. So, and we have a third partner, Akopo Labs, which is a female venture builder.
Okay.
And she brought, I think 50% of our research is female founders and co-founders in tech across Africa.
Wow. Oh, that's a...
So it'll be the voices of the people who are doing the work.
So then let me ask you that final question. You get the opportunity to interview or speak to so many of these entrepreneurs, many of whom I'm sure we haven't heard of or might never hear of, a few of whom we hope make it very big. Give us a few habits or takeaways that you think are really standing them in good stead that you wish more of us would adopt, or that's something to learn from.
I don't think there's any secret sauce to being a successful entrepreneur. I think it's perseverance. You just have to outlast everybody else.
Yeah.
So the thing is, you just don't quit. You just in there, and if that one doesn't work, you're doing the next one. If that doesn't work, and even if it does work, you're doing the next one. And that I think probably one really interesting insight that came out of our research this year was, especially for women, is the need to reformulate yourself. So you heard I started out in corporate, and then I was doing craft, and then then I started a consulting business, and now I'm running an NGO. You are going to constantly have multiple careers and lives and professions, per se. You were in housing. Everyone does something different. So you will recreate yourself, and you need to consciously go look forward and recreate yourself probably every decade or every 5 years or whatever it is. And if you have that thinking, you can work till you're 90 or 100 in something you love, because you are controlling the recreation of what you're doing next.
AI has certainly sped up that process of reinvention or career shift. Is that part of what your new paper, your research is on, or what is the next release? Can you share?
I don't know I've had an inquiry about doing something in space, which of course I know nothing about. I know very little about AI. But I think what we do is we stay open in terms of what that next research will be. I think what AI brought, which we'll talk a little bit about tomorrow as well, is that it's made the playing field a little bit easier for a lot of people. So let's say you want to investigate something and you want to write up about something. You can use AI to leverage that, and especially for women who might be scared to ask. It's a great space where you can teach yourself and experiment and not always have to go and find experts to ask about things, although you'll probably have to do a bit of both.
I'll come to you for the experts.
I'm no expert. I think the one thing you learn when you're interviewing experts is the less you know.
Well, it's a good lesson in humility.
That's what entrepreneurship is about. It's how much humbler can you be? And if you haven't learned that, I'm sorry, Elon Musk. If you haven't learned that, then you will get the crashing downs. They will come, and it's part of it.
One of the analogies which I really enjoy from one of our last episode was entrepreneurs, instead of Jell-O when you throw it to a floor which splatters, they're like a rubber ball. The harder you throw it down, the more energy it has going up. And I think you're right. And then the resilience of Africans across the continent just underlines the point, which gives us hope and optimism. So,
thank you very much.
Thank you for your time. It's been great.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Shapers, Makers, Builders and Breakers. We trust that you've been encouraged by what you've just heard. Subscribe to future episodes and find out more about us at shaperspodcast.co.za. That is shaperspodcast.co.za.
Well, that's right. Don't forget to subscribe for new episodes and other content. And remember, share any feedback with us. We'd love to hear from you. Find me on Twitter at b_d_shaw or via email. We look forward to your company the next time on Shapers, Makers, Builders and Breakers. Until that time, cheers, bye-bye.